What's up, riders? Today we're diving into something pretty special. Features on vintage motorcycles that make you think, wait, they had that back then? You know how everyone thinks modern bikes invented everything cool? Well, buckle up, because we're about to blow your mind with some innovations that were decades ahead of their time. Number 10. BMW's Flying Brick Computer, 1983. Alright, let's kick this off with something absolutely bonkers. You know how modern bikes have all these fancy engine management systems? BMW was rocking a full-on computer system in 1983 with the K100. I'm not talking about some basic circuit board. This thing monitored engine performance, fuel consumption, and even had a digital diagnostic system. In 1983. When most people were still amazed by Pac-Man, BMW was basically putting a primitive ECU on two wheels. The really crazy part is that this system could actually tell you what was wrong with the bike through a series of blink codes. Think about that. Mechanical diagnostics when most bikes still needed a guy with really good ears to figure out what was wrong. Sure, it wasn't as sophisticated as today's onboard diagnostic systems, but man, was this thing some serious Back to the Future stuff. Number 9. Yamaha's YPVS, 1983. Do you remember when two-strokes ruled the world? Yamaha looked at the screamers and thought, you know what? Let's make them even better. They created the Yamaha Power Valve system. Now, if you're thinking, power valve is a big deal, hold on to your helmet. The YPVS wasn't just some simple on-off valve. This system actually changed the exhaust port height based on revolutions per minute. It gave monster low-end torque without sacrificing that insane top-end power two-strokes were famous for. And the modern variable valve timing? Yes, Yamaha was basically doing that 40 years ago on two-stroke engines. The RZ350 with this system was so ahead of its time, it made other bikes look like they were running on steam power. Number 8. Honda's ProLink suspension, 1981. Here's where things get really interesting. You know how every modern sports bike has some form of progressive rear suspension linkage? Well, Honda dropped this bomb in 1981. The ProLink system wasn't just some marketing scheme, it was a complete rethink of how motorcycle suspension should work. Instead of the traditional twin-stock setup that basically just went up and down, the Honda ProLink used a rising rate linkage that got progressively stiffer as it compressed. This meant you could have a good ride for normal cruising, but still have the support needed when you decide to pretend you're super fast. And the genius part? The basic principle of operation has not changed much in 40 years because Honda pretty much nailed it the first time. Number 7. Kawasaki's GPZ 750 Unitrak, 1983. When speaking of suspension, Kawasaki wasn't about to let Honda have all the fun. Their Unitrak system in 1983 was like something created out of a sci-fi movie. They basically took the whole rear suspension geometry and turned it on its head. So instead of having traditional dual shocks, they used a single shock mounted almost horizontally. But here's the really wild part. They designed it with anti-squat characteristics. Normally that means the bike wouldn't nosedive under acceleration like every other bike of the era. This is standard stuff now. But in 1983, this was basically motorcycle witchcraft. Number 6. Suzuki's oil cooling system, 1985. Alright, gather around for this one because it's pretty clever. The GSX R750 showed up in 1985 with this weird hybrid cooling system. It was not fully liquid cooled, not fully air cooled, but something in between. Suzuki basically said, hey, what if we used engine oil as a coolant? They ran oil through the cylinder head to cool crucial areas without the weight and complexity of a full liquid cooling system. And the result? The birth of a bike that could run hard without overheating and did not need all the radiator plumbing. As for motorbikes with their fancy cooling systems, they're basically just complicated versions of what Suzuki figured out when Madonna was still topping the charts. Number 5. Norton's Isolastic engine mounting, 1967. You think vibration management is supposedly a modern thing, right? How about you tell that to Norton? In 1967, they introduced the Commando with its Isolastic mounting system. Instead of bolting the engine directly to the frame, they suspended it on rubber mounts that allowed controlled movement. The result? All the character of a parallel twin with none of the teeth-chattering vibration. The modern bikes use simple principles, just fancier materials and computer modeling. Norton figured this out using slide rules and pure engineering genius. Number 4. Vincent's adjustable riding position, 1948. Do you think adjustable foot pegs and handlebars are a modern comfort feature? Vincent did that in 1948 with their Black Shadow. You could adjust the foot peg position, the seat height, and even the handlebar angle. They basically invented motorcycle ergonomics when most manufacturers were still figuring out how to make reliable engines. And get this, the adjustments were actually well engineered and were not some sketchy bolt-on system that would shake loose after 100 miles. Number 3. Moto Guzzi's integrated braking, 1976. Listen up, because this one's wild. You know how modern bikes have all those fancy link braking systems? Moto Guzzi was doing this stuff back when Saturday Night Fever was still in theaters. Their 850 T3 model came with this crazy system where hitting the rear brake also activated one front disc. But here's the really mind-blowing part. They didn't just connect the lines with some T-piece and call it a day. They actually engineered a proper proportioning system. It was like having ABS before ABS was even a thing. While other manufacturers were still arguing about whether disc brakes were really necessary, Moto Guzzi was out here living in 2023. Number 2. BMW's telescopic front forks, 1935. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. Telescopic forks? Really? But hear me out. Before BMW dropped this bombshell on their R12 model, motorcycles were being produced with all sorts of weird front-end setups. Imagine trying to ride fast with what basically looked like a bicycle fork with some springs attached. BMW showed up with hydraulically dampened telescopic forks that actually worked. We're talking proper suspension movement, actual dampening, and none of that death wobble nonsense that plagued earlier bikes. The crazy part is that the basic design is still in use today. Sure, there's been the addition of adjustable this and electronic that, but the core principle was pure 1935 BMW brilliance. Number 1. Honda CB750's complete package, 1969. Alright, the last one on the list, the Honda CB750. This model wasn't just ahead of its time with one feature, it was basically a time machine. Front disc brakes? Check. Reliable electric start? Yup. Overhead cam 4-cylinder engine? Oh yeah. 4x4 exhaust? You bet. But here's what really makes it insane. Honda put all this technology in a package that actually worked and didn't cost as much as a house. While other manufacturers were still pushing twins and trying to convince people that oil leaks were part of the character, Honda was building what was essentially a modern motorcycle in 1969. It's like they had a crystal ball and saw exactly where motorcycle design was headed. And that's our list of motorcycle features that were so far ahead of their time, they make you wonder if time travel is real. These weren't just random innovations, they were glimpses into the future of motorcycling. And the really crazy part is that most of these features are still being used today, but just with fancier materials and more electronics. We hope you enjoyed exploring this motorcycle history with us. Hit the subscribe button and ring the bell to catch on to our upcoming videos. You can also drop a comment below and tell us which feature surprised you the most, or share other vintage innovations you think deserve recognition. And if you want to see any of these bikes up close, let us know. We might just have to do some hands-on videos with these legendary machines. Until next time, remember that the best way to look forward is to look back.